Hey guys, and welcome to another SPFBO9 review. So this one is going to be for the Bleeding Stone. So I didn't know anything about this going into it. I haven't read this author before. This is a debut novel, so that would make sense. So I didn't know anything about this going into it. The cover kind of like gave me historical fiction vibes, and that is kind of what you get here. I don't know what all officially qualifies as historical fiction. This is secondary world, so it is inspired by colonial, or rather post-colonial America, between like the 15 and 1600s when Europeans were first showing up here and first starting to have interactions with people. And actually there are multiple timelines, which got a little bit confusing for me, although it said at the beginning of the chapter where you are in the timeline. I was text-to-speeching, so it got a little bit confusing, but it did iron out for me, and that's probably the way I read it rather than the actual delivery of the story. So there are multiple timelines, there are multiple characters, and the prologue opens up actually from the viewpoint of the invaders. Now, the main story is told by two points of view from the indigenous people. They are brother and sister, and their father was the chief of the Stone Tribe. But you start out with this jackass named Oryx. At least that's how TTS pronounced it for me. And he is just an ass. And you see him sporadically throughout the rest of the story. And it definitely creates like a dichotomy between these two perspectives. So the indigenous perspective is definitely drawing on Native American lore and culture a little bit. I can't really point to a specific tribe and say this or that, but the idea of communing with animals and going on vision quests of sorts and all that kind of stuff was definitely had Native American vibes to it. And I probably think it's a good idea not to try and draw directly from certain tribes unless you really know what you're doing. I am not a good enough historian to tell you how much of this was derived from Native American culture, but it is definitely the overall vibes and tones. So it starts off with the indigenous people. So Bryn is on, I don't know what is with my light. So Bryn is a boy, well, turning into a man. He's going through his coming of age ritual as you were introduced to him. And he is communing with like this owl god. He was born under the sign of the owl, and so he has this vision that his greatest asset is going to be his mind. And he comes out of this trance-like thing, and his family is all around him, and his sister is missing. So his sister is the other point of view, and she is an alcoholic. When this was all going on, instead of being there to support her brother, she was getting shit-faced. And she actually is sort of a relatable character, even at the beginning, because you sort of understand why she's doing this. She is a complete outcast from her tribe. Like, her brother was born under the sign of the owl. That is not the only sign you can be born under. She was born under no sign. So she was kind of cursed. So she was born, I believe, when there was an eclipse and there was no sign up in the sky. And all the midwives are like, don't birth her yet. But like, oh well, babies just kind of do what they do. And so she was born under no sign. And so she has no real status. She is definitely shunned. And she believes, probably rightfully so, that if she was not the daughter of the chieftain, that she may have just been left outside, let nature take its course, which is essentially, you know, leaving her to die. And she knows this, and she's not wrong. And she's out drinking because here's her little brother going through this thing that she'll never have. And so there's definitely an interesting tension between her family and her habits, and the rest of the tribe and her habits. And so shit all goes wrong. The invaders come and like fuck up her with her family. And so that's sort of where the story kicks off. It is slower paced for me. So the pacing definitely took a while for me to come around to it. I really love the characters, and I really love the world building. I really love the ambition of this story. I'll just say now that it's safe, because I'm about to go into things that didn't work for me. I don't want the author to have like a heart attack. It is safe at this point. But there were some definite things that got under my skin, and most of it was word choice. So very early on, the word choice was orifice. A character was described as sweating out of every orifice of their body. And I went and I looked up the definition to be sure I wasn't incorrect. It cannot mean pore. So orifice means a large vent. So your mouth, your nose, your ass. It does not mean pores. And then this other time, or rather this other word that was used multiple times, how I feel incorrectly, was ruminate. A character could hear people ruminating through a wall or something like that, and it happened a couple times. I had never heard this being used as something audible. I had always thought that ruminate meant to sit and think about the same thing over and over, to ruminate, to chew on, to go over, a silent activity. Other people have heard this word used because I consulted other people. I'm like, am I being weird for caring too much about this? Other people had heard that as like they were ruminating to themselves, as in like whispering to themselves. But it still doesn't make sense to have a whole lot of people ruminating to the point where someone would hear them through the wall. So there were just a few word choices that just did not go over well with me. But those are super nitpicky, I feel, because most of it was very well written. So that is my take on this. I really love some aspects of it, and other aspects, just a few things, got under my skin, and it was a little bit slower, but it did pick up. It has a lot to offer, so I hope that people pick this up. It is safe, so thank you so much for sticking around if you have for almost 7 minutes.